looking at CON3031W-2020-03C. It's a good example because this is actually one of the hardest examples that we work with. I'm going to try and run through it in half an hour. That is a challenge for me, other than making the video, drawing, and preparing everything. It is a massive challenge to produce these things. Anyway, half an hour. Let's go. Okay, first item on the agenda. Let's highlight this. Stretcher bond, unless otherwise specified. We don't really highlight that. That's obvious. English bond in, external wall outside. One brick external wall is this one here. Highlight that. Now, when you get that information in the assessment, you should write it down immediately. That's like an exception. And why? You must ask yourself, why would it be in the specification? And if you know your work, you'd say, well, Anthony, the English bond has a brick, a header course, a header brick, that is a header that's visible on both sides. I don't actually know what that's called. Anyway, that brick that's visible on both sides, by virtue of it being visible on both sides, makes that entire one brick wall a solid item. And it will be reclassified later into a solid item when you do face brick. So that's the trick there. We'll come to it. Internally at 3000 millimeters. So you have to ask yourself, why do we need that information? Well, we have a lot of internal walls here. And the rule for internal walls is, any guesses? It goes up to ceiling height and 2 courses higher. And that is just for the NFP brickwork. When it comes to the finish is actually just to ceiling height. So that is what that information is for. Let's get rid of all this shit. That information there about ceiling height will be relevant later. Let's go into the actual measurements. So piers, I don't think I need to really discuss what the piers, the piers are pretty straightforward in terms of the NFP brickwork. So it's time to reveal what I've made for you guys. All right. Wow, I know. Woohoo. Pretty cool, right? So, let's see. Let's zoom out a bit. Okay. So what I've done is I've placed the entire measurement in stages that you can visually interpret. So I've gone from sort of ground level without any walls, so you can just see what the plan would look like. And then I've moved up the heights so that you can see sort of the progression all the way to finally reaching a gable end that is raked and cut, right? So we're going to start with the plan version. And I am going to let you pause it at any point just so you can digest what's going on here. And I've also color-coded it really nicely. So it should be clear to you what is what here in your mind. And hopefully when you don't have this in front of you, you should be able to sort of visually group items. So let's just go by the memo. The first item was the piers. I've done that in orange. All of that is in orange. I guess I should probably color code my drawings. That's all right. Orange. Again, so this pier, the L-shaped pier, is broken up into 2 sections. And if we zoom in quick, not that one, not that one. Oh, my keyboard shortcut's not working. Anyway, okay. So, okay, I grouped it differently. But there are different ways you can group it. So you can either, as long as you cut the L shape correctly into 2 pieces and then taken at the full height, everything should be fine, right? And then the 330 by 330 is the same story. Oh man. Yeah, you know why this is happening. I'm running like 3 different sets of software at the same time. Okay, there we go. It's alive. So let's just give up on the piers because that's straightforward, right? Come on, please don't do this to me. Okay, piers are fine. Let's move on to the hollow walls. That is a collection. The collection is also pretty straightforward. You're going to follow the center lines. Sorry, not the center lines. So the external wall on the north and south face is measured straight across. And then if you look at the breakdown of her measurement, that 6.5 is the full gable length. So the gable was measured through. So let's just draw that in there. There and there. We go over to the 3D model. Let's just take a look at what that looks like. So I actually originally put a line straight across here to just try and help visualize it, and straight across there. And the reason is actually quite obvious once you come further down Brickwork, why we measure gables through. But we'll see that just now. So that collection makes sense, and I'll discuss the height now. And then these little bits extra, especially that one, is very interesting. And that is I think that's the gable rectangle. That's the triangle. And that's the external wall. So let's just run through from this one here. That little piece, that's 6.5 by 0.25. I'll try to show on the model. And I've got to figure out where. So what we're saying is that all of the walls that are red, or basically orange in this case, were taken up to a height of 3.25 meters, or 3,250 millimeters. So wall plate height. So we collected this face, well, not that face, that wall. Hang on, let's get that one, and that one, and that one. Okay, those were collected. We did that externally, and we took it up to 3.25, right? That's in the memo. Come on. That one right there at the top, 3.25. Okay. What happened after that was that if you, by virtue of me making you a lovely model, it's very clear, you have not measured this little piece that is above the isolated beam. There's a small piece of brickwork above the isolated beam, because the isolated beam only reaches the 3,000 millimeters, right? 3 meter height on this side. So I actually kept the isolated beam empty for you to see straight through into the model, but the isolated beam goes up to 3 meters. So depending on how you want to measure this, you could, in theory, if you want to measure up to 3 meters and then do an entire ring of 0.25 up. So, but in terms of the memo, we have the U shape has gone up to 3.25. I say U shape, it's like that. It's gone up to 3.25. So if you use this side, 3.25 U shape, and that little strip above the isolated beam is just 250 mils. So that is that 6.5 by 0.25 is that little strip that I've described. It's below the gable ends on those faces. The other gable end was covered by the U shape, right? Okay, the 0.3 by 0.25 is a curious situation. That's the recording software. Let's just take a look here. I've tried to draw it in. So what happens with this drawing is that the column, it might be better to show you on the other one. Is it possible? See, this one's the only one. Okay. The column is, I think it's 300, right? And the wall is 270, but the wall is actually, its face is flush with this side of the 300 beam, which means that there's going to be a 30 mil offset on the other side, right? And that 30 mil offset creates a little tiny little piece of wall here on top of that isolated beam that you have to account for. So it's 30 that way by 245 upwards. And there are two sides of it, okay? So that's the one, and that's the other one here. Now what's interesting is that I didn't see it measured for the internal walls. If you want to, you can measure it for the internal walls, but in this case, I've actually left it empty. You'll see that there's nothing there because it's not in the memo, but I think it should be. Anyway, that's the case with the tiny little 0.03 by 0.25. Gosh, my drawing is terrible. Okay. Let's move on to, so that's the gable rectangle. I'm going to do the gables together. So the gable, we measured the rectangle below the triangle of the gable, and then the actual triangle. So over to the model, we're departing from this one because we've already reached 3.25. And based on the drawings, you come down to 3.25 height. That's right there. So you've gone 3 meters and you've gone 3.25. So we are now, we've come that high already, and we want to start measuring this rectangle that's going in the gable. Okay, you know what? I need to use the pen to draw. I don't know why I keep forgetting this. Okay, so let's try that again. The rectangle that goes in the gable, this one, is missing. So we went up to ceiling height. We did an extra 0.25. And now we're going to do gable rectangle, gable triangle. Model. I suspect it's going to take a bit longer having a model to show everything, but in the long run, I think the change in how you visualize your work is going to be worthwhile. So this is what we're talking about. That gable rectangle right there, probably let's go to the next one because it's even better. That gable rectangle, so this point is 3250. And then this distance is 370. So back to memo, 370. And the next one, we're going to take a trapezium measurement. So this is just the basic formula for a trapezium. And this was 670. Yeah, 670 by 650. Again, no surprises there. This bottom item was the external wall. Let's take a look. Okay, so again, pretty straightforward. The external wall is this green item here that I've drawn. Nothing really to worry about, to be honest. What we do need to keep in the back of our minds, though, is that the spec did say that that's English bond. So whilst we've done it now in NFP brickwork and class 2 cement mortar, you must just keep it in the back of your mind. It's coming for you. And if you don't take heed, you're going to lose marks. Okay, let's go. Come on, scroll. Okay, so now the next thing is that you must keep in mind that you've done piers, you've done straight hollow wall, and then you can do the curved wall separately, or you have to do the curved wall separately, right? So what's important to remember is that you must follow the center line when you do these NFP measurements. The brickwork measurement is the center line. When you come and do a finish to the faces, you must do the external dimensions. So I guess it makes sense to use this one. So when you come and do your NFP measurement, you've got to come to that center line right in the middle of the cavity, which is going to be quite hard for me to get to. But there we go. And 2 point. 2.265. I wonder if that's right. Okay, but anyway, you understand what I'm saying. So Brickwork takes the center line. Then when you come to finishes, you're going to take internal radius on this face, and the external radius would be that on that face. Okay, pretty straightforward. So that is that first column complete. This calculation here is just that is half of the 270 millimeter cavity wall, and it's half because we're getting the center line. What I actually always get caught out with is that it's two, right? I mean, you've got to remember it's two skins of brickwork. It's got to get two sort of measurements of reinforcement in the brickwork. Okay, so closing of cavity horizontally. No surprises here. I don't think there was anything particularly confusing. What we can do is I can just show you with the model where this is happening. We have to decide which one. Okay, so this one's probably all right. All of these open spaces, let's just check. We're doing the, yeah, so actually there's a trick here, funny enough. What you should have noticed is that this will take the roof plan 7560 and not the floor plan, which was 7530. Okay, and the reason being, if you're smart and you remember that little 30 millimeter piece that's here is now included when you measure closing of cavities. So that's also something, a lesson you should take from this drawing. If there's a closing of cavities, you must try and sort of visualize what is going on higher up. If there's a change in length, it's not the same as floor plan. In this case, there's 30 mils difference. So we take that length, the full length, and it's, you see, I've seen examples where it's the inside length, not the full length. So let's just go up to this roof plan. So, and also, by the way, I think this is an error. So that's not 30. That's 7560. We know this. This is not guesswork. We know that that's 7560. So it's not measured through, guys. So this is pretty important. Gable ends are always favored from everything that I've seen. Gable ends are always favored to go through. And I guess it makes sense. It's you're not going to put a horizontal item that's sort of easier to do when in reality on site the guy's doing a raked length at that corner. You know, it's not flat. That edge there is still sloping. It does make sense to do the horizontals short of the gables. Yeah. Okay. So that's that. The other one, closing, was, it's not visible on this roof plan, but the other closing was this one. And it's also pretty straightforward, 2.4. So that plus the 110. And again, it's the concept that the bigger walls are favored because from what I've seen, a half brick wall doesn't close cavities. I haven't seen it, put it that way. I think because in other examples we've had beam filling that comes up to a cavity wall, and it's not enough to just say that the beam filling closed it. You must still measure it full length and then also account for the closing. Okay? Even though you could argue, you might want to argue with me and tell me, you know, Anthony, the half brick wall closes that cavity. But you would be wrong. You must measure that vertical closing of the cavities. It's going to come up. So that is the top. When you come to the, okay, so you've got to separate your circular items again. So this is the center line, like I described previously. No surprises there. Gables is when, like I've just said, you must favor the gable length over the eaves length. So it's a full 6.5. It's at full length as opposed to the shorter eaves lengths running through, right? Gables run through. That's that. This is questionable because I can't find the 12 degrees. So what I would say is if you just use Pythagoras and figure it out, okay? Perfectly fine in my mind. And what I actually do is I put a real value there. What is that actual slope length is what I put in there. There's no reason why that can be wrong. Yeah, let's move on to vertically. So vertically, like I explained, but there's this one which is interesting. Let's start with that one. So that is the edges of the gables. Now I want to show it in the model because I spent a lot of time and I want to show off my model. I'm really interested now is that what happens to that little edge, because it's 0.37. 0.37. But it seems too little to me. I could be wrong, but 0.37 seems a bit too little. Okay, so what I realized this whilst I was drawing this model, guys. So you gave me that discovery. Where a hollow wall comes and meets another hollow wall, there's no need for closing a cavity. Even though we measured it separately as a 6.5 by 0.25. If you recall, we measured the big U, measured this big U shape up to 3.25, right? All of those faces are up to 3.25. Sorry, that should not be that high, but anyway. And then we measured this 6.5 by 0.25 in the same measurement item, but separately. And in my mind, it didn't really connect in my brain that is one unit coming up and closing its own cavities. Okay? But then when I drew this, I realized that's exactly what's happening. The cavities, when you added that 6.5 there, it closed it. It closed that face and the face coming in towards from the right to the left and from back to your face. They've been closed. But it has not closed anything above that. Okay? And because we measured a gable rectangle, which was 365 millimeters high on both sides, that's what we now have to close. Because as you can see, it hasn't been closed by the beam filling. I've drawn in the beam filling here, and we'll get to beam filling, but what I said previously is that beam filling a 110 millimeter does not close a cavity wall. If you're measuring and favoring cavity walls through, which looks like that's the practice, your beam filling or your 110 half bricks, they don't count as closing. Put it that way. You want to argue and tell me that it closed that cavity? It's not true. The memo says that you have to close it. Okay, so that's how I've interpreted it and drawn it. So visual representation actually does make sense to corroborate the memo. That is that. There are 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And that one, 1.42 arch lower rectangle. Oh, okay. So I feel like I've missed pages. Did I skip pages? Because we didn't make a deduction, but okay, whatever. Arch lower rectangle. Oh man, Why am I confused now, guys? And it's -1 course. That one's a mystery to me. Although I might have an answer. How did we end up? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry. I don't have all the answers. I have some answers, but it does turn out that I happen to be human. So if you have the answer to that, you're more than welcome to share it with me. I probably know what it is, but I can't tell you now. I just don't know. Actually, I'm not sure what's going on there. I know you have to close the cavities in the arches. So let's just take a look at the arches, because I don't know what's going on. But this arch, which is in the cavity wall, has 2 vertical sides that need to be closed. Okay, and I think it's 2.1 meters high. Right? Where's the arch that I've measured? Measured one of them. There we go. 2.1 meters high times 2. So we've got that one. That one I've got. Okay. Now, what is the 1.42? Okay. I'm being stupid. Okay. So that's the external wall. Right? The external cavity wall. This one. That face. So what I've just said, the half brick wall does not count as a closing. We measured the cavity wall through as the full length. I think it was 2.4 meters, if I recall correctly. And it's 2.1 meters high. So that vertical length needs to be closed. Okay. Problem solved. Mystery. Half brick wall. Okay, so beam filling. This is just standard. It's a separate item. Beam filling is a separate item, and it's not measured through, it's measured short. Notice here, it's the roof, let's call it the roof height. The roof height length. So it means it adds this little 30 millimeters here. So remember the trick. It's not the bottom, it's the top length, just a little bit extra. That's what's going on there. And the beam filling, that height of 370 millimeters is straight off the elevation. So no surprises. Then you should be able to get that. Okay, so then it comes on to division walls. So if you just, keeping in the back of your mind that a lot of these items will be measured in NFP, but they're going to need to be adjusted later. Because we know the rules about what justifies a solid item face brick. And we're going to measure these in NFP now, but we know that we're going to have to adjust them later. And that one is particularly important because that is so ceiling height was given as 3,000. And we know this because it was at the beginning of the drawing, right? Do we need to go back up to the beginning of the drawing when I said, remember, it's 3,000? There we go. 3,000. So because we know it's 3,000 and we're doing brickwork, the brickwork goes 2 courses higher. Okay? And that's that. I'm not going to rewrite it for you. Okay? What's the next item? The external wall. Okay, so that was just the one brick outside. That tiny little green wall there is that one. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to our half brick walls. Actually, misinterpreted. Okay, so the one brick wall is not adjusted later, guys, unless it's the English or Flemish bonds, which is when a brick is visible. Single brick is visible on both sides. That same brick, you can see a face of it on both sides. When it comes to half brick, we know these have to be adjusted. There's just no physical way of making a half brick without having both a face visible on each side. Anyway, the first thing is to do it in NFP, which is happening here. Notice it's taken the shorter length from plan, 7,530. These ones are all just given on plan. That one is to ceiling height. That one's also to ceiling height. And this is because it's outside. There's a different height. So let's just focus on these two internal walls. I guess it might help to go to this one. I'm not really sure. So I drew it actually quite nicely. I tried to display the difference in what's happening here. We've taken it up to 3,000. The measurements are on that wall there. Okay, that's better. So we've taken it up to 3,000. The one brick wall has also gone up to 3,000 plus two courses, 170. And it's in white. Those two courses stay in NFP brickwork because they're not visible. We don't need to worry about additional costs of finish because no one's going to see it. The half brick wall which we're on now, that measurement there is 7,530, right? 7,530. Taken to 3 meters high and two courses high. And the same is true for this one and this one. So that is what we've got. We've got one 7,530 length and then two, I don't actually know what that length is, 2 times 203. So that is there. 203. That's that. Half brick linings. This one I always try and draw out because I get a bit confused. I actually measure things twice. Don't measure things twice. You cut your half brick lining wherever you want, really. I'll cut it there, and what I do is measure. Let's go to the other face because I think I actually did it like that. Yes, 410. So that's just my way, and it might not be like the memo, but it's still right. You've measured the right amount. I've cut that across 410, and I add this little piece here. What is it? 270. 270. Yes. I add them. So what I do is I put in a 680 as if it's a long little strip, and I take it to full height. But you could have two separate items. You could go 410 by 3 meters high, or 0.410 by 3 meters, or 0.38 by 3 meters. The memo splits it up. So, I mean, it's all the same. 55 millimeter cut brick lining. This is trouble. This is trouble. When you start looking at what's going on with this beam and the lining, you know, your eyes start to cross because it's like, what the fuck is going on? So I drew it very nicely. Look at this. Come on. I mean, it's color coded and everything. So I was also a bit confused about what's getting deducted here, what's getting added. But whilst we're on the brick lining, let's just talk about the brick lining here. 55 millimeter cut brick lining. There. And what you measure is the length times the height. So it's pretty straightforward. There's no trick there at that point. But the difficult I find is when you deduct the finish because you kind of forget that the toe is part of the deduction as well. But yeah, that's not too bad. But forewarning, the deduction is a bit complicated. Bands. So the bands, if it's projecting, you measure, but you don't measure if it's recessed, right? So let's take a look at what I drew for the bands. In pink, we measure those ones, and you ignore the ones that go inwards. So the 55 by 85 millimeters, you'd put in your description. You'd say it's 55 millimeters projecting from face, 1 course high. So those 2 dimensions are already in your description, which means that it's a linear length. Okay, you don't put 2 by 0.05, 0.06 by 0.09. You've already got 2 dimensions in the description. You only need to put 1 in your line. So that is fine. The archways, you've just got a per unit measurement. One for, so the separation here is just to show the difference in understanding. You must know, okay, I'll explain just from the drawing. So fundamentally, all we're saying is how many courses of brickwork is the arch going through. That's all we're really interested in. And the reason is that it affects, one, it affects if it's a cavity wall, you're going to have to close. So that's the one differentiation. The other is that how many different, what is it called? Brick on edge header rings. So how many brick on edge header rings do you need? If it is a half brick wall, you're going to need 1. It's just that one skin that gets that header ring. If it's a cavity wall, 1, 2 brick on edge header rings. Okay. And as far as I know, that is what you're showing there. Your deductions are identical. So let me reword that. The measurement is identical, but you can't actually put them together. I wish you could. But because one is a half brick wall and the other is a 270 wall, you can't put them in the same description. Yeah. Okay. Here's the closing of the cavities for the arch that I thought we'd previously did and got confused, but it's here. So that's just the inside face for the hollow wall there and there up 2.4 meters. The arch this is a separate item. Basically, it's horizontal, vertically, circular, or raking and cutting. Those are the 3 sort of closing of cavity items that we have that we must be on the lookout for, and they are separate. Okay, so the recess is also a really interesting one that I get caught out with, is that I recognize, okay, sure, there's a deduction because there's a shitload of brickwork that's now not going to go in and we're not going to measure it. But what I forget is the lintel. And so, oh man, don't do this to me. So I've drawn it. Now I'm stuck in a wall. Yeah. I'm very stuck in a wall. That's not going to help. Okay. There we go. So that's the lintel. You're going to deduct that area out of your brick wall. But now, yeah, it's the reclassification. But what's interesting is that this is going to be another reclassification. It's going to be reclassified twice. So in NFP, this was is it 220? So it went from 220 to a half brick wall. Okay, so this is the first adjustment, is to just adjust the brickwork. After this, it then goes into face brick. We're going to find out that it has to be a deduction of a half brick. We won't deduct the reinforcement. Why? Because it's just going to be used in the face brickwork. So it's a deduction of that half brick that we adjusted to right here. And we're going to have an and face brick, half brick wall. Okay. So there's 2 adjustments for that item. And I'm not sure if it's a good idea to just jump straight to the final product and say, look, I'm a smarty pants and I know that that's going to be the answer right at the end. So don't waste my time making one measurement as a 220 wall, then adjusting it as a half brick wall, then deducting the half brick wall and making it a face brick wall. I mean, it's actually quite a long story. If you're brave, maybe take it straight to it. I don't really see why you'd be marked down for that. Go ahead, be bold. I don't see a problem with it, but I think it's probably better to stick with the process, because I think the steps. What's good is that if you follow the steps, you can't really go wrong. You measure everything as it is, you adjust as you go along, and the final product will be fully accounted for. But I think when you start to jump from, instead of doing 220, you go straight to that, I think maybe you might fall short somewhere eventually. Okay, this was just, you've got to add 215 millimeters to the opening. That's all this is. That was the lintel in the model. Okay, face brickwork. This is the half perimeter times 2. Let's just do it on here. So it's that plus that. Okay, and because it's the irregular shape, but literally if you just take that and you reshape it, it would make the same length, just a different shape. But it will still come out to 990. Okay? That's the height given. It's the same story here with the rectangular one. It's the 330 by 330 is 0.66. Okay? This deduction, pretty straightforward. That's what we're deducing as a finish. And this one is the lining. So the lining is where things start to get a bit messy. So let's just take a look at what I've got for you here. So I guess when measuring the lining, we should just... God, it's hard to use this with a trackpad. Okay. Almost there. I guess the lining, you take the perimeter. Just remember, it's that 110 all the way around. And you're going to include... I mean, don't jump the gun. You're going to include that little where it's been covered up by the isolated beam and the cut brick lining. So it's right through. So that's actually exactly what I've done in the model with yellow, is that it is through. Okay, so that's... But now, okay, yeah, so that's a half brick lining. This, as described, 50 millimeter lining is that piece coming in that I've just shown you now in the model. This this face needs to be deducted, and it's quite a neat trick, especially with having a model like this. Is quite clear now, but this is a really nice question, assessment question, to have a little deduction. But not just the deduction of the lining, to have an irregular isolated beam, and it's going to stick out a little bit and also need to be added into the deduction. I mean, you got to actually appreciate that kind of the thinking that's gone into that. So it's the full height so it's the toe and the lining above it. It's the full height, 0.68. Okay, all inclusive there. Don't make the mistake of making it 0.6. Okay. That is okay, so we've just done for piers. So just keep in mind, piers, we include all the isolated, isolated. Okay, so all the piers, and I was actually thinking of attached piers, but that's not here. So 1 pier, 2 pier, the little linings that are, and I believe it's 110 mils or more, right? because the 55 mil cut lining goes elsewhere. So 110 mils or more. All of that goes into piers. And if we want to sort of theoreticize where an attached pier would fall in, I would throw it in there too. Let's say if there was a little attached pier here, it would go into piers, I think. I'll tell you what, when I make the next video, I will find out. Okay. Okay. So after piers, and it follows actually the same procedure as when you did your NFP work. The NFP brickwork was, we did piers first, then we measured the hollow walls, and then it was the separations. The one was circular, and then it went on to one bricks. But then face brick will be your piers as face brick, the perimeters of them, and any deductions, and then your brickwork as face brick. But because we're doing brickwork, it's actually indiscriminately all of the brickwork. So the external perimeters and the internal perimeters. So it's a very long process here. I think I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but let's just summarize like the most important points. So I really know which ones to touch on here. These are straightforward as far as I remember. There's one that was confusing me. It was, okay, this one was the ends. Okay, so the ends, control. The ends of, which ends? I think yes. North and south ends of east and west. These ends, I think it's that end and that end on that side. That's the finish to those ends, because this face would have been measured up that way as, let's just take, this will be interesting, 8 point. Yeah, so it's, okay, so you see that took the plan size, not the roof size, plan size, up to 3 meters. This collection here was up to 3 meters, but with the shorter one, not with the longer one. It's not including that little 30 millimeter trick that I showed you guys there, this little 30 millimeter here. So that's still, I think it would be part, is it part of the 8.1? Let's take a look. Yes. So the 8.1 is including that little 30 millimeter trick. And there's 2 sides of that. 8.1 on that side, 8.1 on this side. Now, how does she get 8.1? It's that 270 wall plus the 7,530 plus another 270. This is interesting. Oh yeah, okay. Sorry. That 270, that 270, that little 30 as 7,560. Yeah. Okay. So then these ends, which I thought were those ends, actually the ends went into this. So now where do these ends come from? Let's take a look. North and south ends to east and west walls. So I'm not sure, but it looks to me like it's been counted twice, because we've taken the full length at roof. Well, let's call it roof height. That's the full length and inclusive of the 30 mils. And we've added 270 for that wall on that end, the gable end, and 270 on that wall, on that gable end. And in my mind, that is this full length here. From there to there has been counted. That's what has been done. That's 8.1 meters. And we took the 8.1, and there's 2 of them. on the eave sides, 1, 2, and it was 250 mils high. It's this height here. So what's interesting is NFP, we measured all the way up to 3.25. For the face brickwork, there's been a separation, and we've only gone up to 3 meters. And now the face brickwork is that little strip, 8.1, to make up like that 3.25 that we've done. But I'm not so sure about this, to be honest. Because even the description is saying that that's what that is. North and south ends of east and west walls. And especially if it takes the 6.5, which it does. It takes the full 6.5. So it can't be this 270 on this face. It's definitely not there. Because it took this full 6.25. So I'm going to take a leap here and say that that is an error. Okay, because that was the full length on the eave side. And also after that, we see there's a full length on the gable sides. So where could this possibly be? I do not know. Because now we go into the gable side. It's actually used the drawing. So I don't know if my models are that useful, to be honest. Maybe you can tell me. Okay, so it takes a full 6.5. And this side was also the full, it was that plus 270 plus 270. So I'm not sure if that's right. Anyway. So now we're on to, yeah, so that was the gable triangle, the rectangle, the triangle, the inside of the external wall and the outside of the external wall. So just take a look here. That is what we're talking. Oh, come on. That one. Wait. Okay, so outside face is 2.4. And because we're dealing with finish, it's not the sort of the center line as the solid, as the item, but the actual exposed faces. So if the outside is 2.4, the inside is 2.29 because the end has a 110 millimeter wall. And what is interesting is you need to keep track of how many faces are covered and if they are placed elsewhere. So this face, the face brick that we measured here, we are going to put on that side, okay? And the face brick there, we're going to put on that side. Although I think there's an error in the screen wall. We'll find out soon enough. But that's what's happening. The 2.29 is the inside face, and then 2.24 is the outside face. 2.4, 2.29, okay? The deduction, okay, so the deduction was for the, so this is what I'm actually quite confused about, because there's a deduction here for this wall that meets the cavity wall, but I thought it would just go on the other side. So that is odd to me because it does say external one brick wall connection with hollow wall. This, I thought, is also possibly wrong. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to have a deduction there. Then the internal dimensions it's pretty straightforward because you've been given everything. But what I would say is, if you're confused, it's because the internal dimensions only taking where there's finishes to hollow items. So this measurement for internal, it hasn't included the half brick walls in this. So all of these, like when you see 2.1 for the circuit east, yeah. So that's 2.1 for south room west. So that one has only got, wait, it can't be that one. Must be this one. Oh yeah, it's this one, west. Okay, so this is south room west, south, west. and it only has 2.1 for the finish, the face brick finish. You'd be like, well, Anthony, that can't be right. But it is, because it's preemptively saying, we know that this is going to be a solid item eventually. We're going to adjust it in face brick work eventually. We're not going to say, I mean, I guess you could. If you really, really, really wanted to punish yourself, you could put face brick on the full inside and then do a deduction and an adjustment afterwards. And I don't think it'd be wrong. And probably if you were following rules blindly, you should, I mean, maybe do it. But that's why you only find 2.1 is because it's only measuring this face. And in this room, it's only measuring the 3000. And in this room, it measures the 2.21 and this one that comes up. I don't know what that, 2030. So 2210 and 2030. 41424. Yeah. So that's about it, except let's take a look at the deductions quickly. So there's 5 of these, whatever these are. I mean, what a mystery. We'll find out now. It's the horizontal bands. I'm actually not going to go to it, but every single horizontal band has been deducted, not just the projecting ones or the recessed ones, all of them. So for finishes, they're all accounted for, recessed and projected. It's not the case when you come to actually NFP brickwork. You only count the projecting ones in NFP brickwork. But deductions, all of them. 1.5 by 2.2 is that the recess, and the recess was reclassified in brickwork, right? And then when it comes to the finish, we've measured that room straight through. So let's just take a look. This wall, I didn't put the recess in. The model, when I extruded it up. Okay, so the wall we measured straight through, but we didn't make any deductions for the recess face brick finish. But we remember that the NFP was adjusted, so we're going to deduct that. And you could do it actually as a separate item. You could say deduct face brick work. I mean, you could deduct face brick work and face brick work in half brick, I think, because extra over, maybe not. Okay, we'll deduct it there. It's not, you can't adjust from a face brick finish. Yeah. But we do know that there has to be face brick there. So what we've said is that, yes, that wall is face brick. And we are not sure as of yet what is happening in the recess. But because we know the rules, it's going to be a solid item, right? But for now, deduct it from this item. Okay. So then this is the curved wall, the external radius versus the internal radius. Pretty standard stuff there. Beam felling is always a separate item. And I mean, you know, this is a curious one as well, because beam filling in my mind should be a solid item. But I guess if we're saying that it's going to be in the ceiling and no one's going to see the other face, it's actually not a solid item, technically speaking. It's kind of like the brickwork that goes up above the ceiling level. That brickwork above ceiling level is NFP brickwork. We don't measure finish through above the ceiling. So maybe if we look at this, we'd say, okay, well, beam filling is visible on the external face, but not on the internal face. We are not going to make it a solid item. That's what's happening here. This is a non-solid item, and we're counting as an extra over item for it. I guess that's fine. It does make sense. The one brick wall, this is the trick about the English bond. So it's because a brick will be visible on both sides of that one brick wall, it becomes a solid item. Okay, when you have a solid item, you've got to deduct the original item and make a new item. But when you make a new item, try and figure out what you can keep from the old item. So for instance here, you'll see that there's no deduction for reinforcement because previously you did one brick and who. Okay. Now, please don't deduct the reinforcement. If you do, then you've got to add it here. It doesn't really matter, but save yourself some time. Don't deduct it. This is this is where we're adjusting so all of the half brick walls that we previously measured in NFP have to now change to solid items. And let's just take a look there. All of this was in NFP. You have to convert it to solid items. That's what's happening here. You're deducting what was previously in NFP 2 pages ago or 3 pages ago in the memo. And that's your description to make it a solid item. And you'll notice that this should be everything that is missing from this one. So when we measured internally, well, let's back it up a bit here. When we measured these internal walls, we skipped a couple of things. We didn't measure the full perimeter. That's because it's coming here. And it actually takes quite a bit of foresight because you kind of, I guess, instinctively you'd probably put these items there. But it's not the case because of the whole solid item and non-solid item thing. But I mean, in my mind, if you put it here if these items went here, later you would have to deduct 3 items. So you would deduct half brick wall of NFP bricks and deduct, I don't really see why it would be wrong, to be honest, but you're breaking the rules, and deduct E extra over brickwork. So you would deduct the finish to the non-solid item and then and. So you would have a 3-line item that would just be correcting all of the mess you've made. I don't think that would be a problem either, to be totally honest. It actually sounds right to me. But anyway, 55mm cut lining. This is actually not the 680. So remember that previously the toe and the cut lining was 680 total, but the toe is 85mm, which gives you 595 rounded to 0.60 or 600mm. So because this is less than 110mm, you must adjust. Okay? That is the rule for cut linings. If it's less than 110 mils, you must adjust. And it has to be less. If it is equal to 110 millimeters, no adjust. So it's not less than or equal to, it's less than. Just be certain about that, because 110 millimeter lining will come up, and those don't get adjusted. So that's what's happening there. There's one extra item. This is kind of like a labor only item, I guess, because you've previously closed all of your cavities. But what we're saying here is we want our gable ends to look really, really neat, and it's going to take some time, and the guy's going to have to make precision up that gable end. And he's going to use an angle grind and cut everything nicely. It's going to take some time, and it's a cost. That's what's happening there. All of that closed, and by the way, when you come and close your gable ends, it's 2 courses as opposed to 1. Anyway, when you close your gable ends, we want that straight, and we're gonna price for it. That's all that's happening there. The bands, the bands get reclassified as well. I guess that does make sense because it's such a thin, I mean, it's 85 by 55 projecting, but I mean, it would have to go in the wall as well, some bit. But quite a bit of this band is visible. It does logically make sense to make it a solid item. And remember, there's only 3 projecting, and there's 2 that go in. So those 3 we're reclassifying as a solid item. That's what's happening. That one. But now I'm confused. Okay. Right, so the projecting bands, you see I'm learning. The projecting bands get reclassified as a solid item, but then the recessed bands are just sort of extra over, but because there's no item coming out the wall, I guess it's a labor item, not so much a full unit or material costed. This is just sort of extra work. We're accounting for extra care and time in boxing out, or maybe even having to support the now void that is in the wall. So that's what we're talking about there, which is news to me. Okay, so the deductions for the openings in the walls where you had arches. So not just that, but the arches themselves need to be reclassified. And because it's brick on edge, there we go, brick on edge headering, most of that brick is also visible again. It's like almost all of its faces are visible. So that's what's happening, the deduction and adjustment into a solid item. And the thing is, you're going to separate it again into which walls it lives in. So which wall does this arch live in? This arch lives in a half brick wall. And it's only one. Okay. And then also you must mention how many header rings? One header ring, because it's a half brick wall. Okay. The deduction is this in this example at least, the arches are the same sizes in area. And this one was 2. Now we're talking about the cavity wall, which has 2 header rings, right? Almost there, guys. And I lied. I said this was going to be half an hour long. I'm horrible at this. Okay. I'm not sure now. Okay, it's the same as previously. You're going to deduct the finish. Yeah, because you previously measured face brick over those walls. You just need to deduct the voids that those arches made. And I wonder if the reveals are... Anyway, I'll get to it. Okay, so that's the reveal, but that is the external reveal, right? Because that's a 270mm cavity wall. And you recall we closed it already when we did vertical closing. So this is just sort of the finish to those vertically closed cavities. Okay, that's the recess. So this was a double adjustment because we already went and said that this recess, we already said went from a 220 wall to a 110 wall. Then we said, well, yeah, it's a 110 wall, but we don't like that because now when the finish comes, it's a 110 wall that becomes a half brick face brick wall, solid item. So we have to now reclassify it again. Deduct the half brick wall, deduct the extra over finish to the half brick wall, and make it a solid item. Double adjustment for that one. I'm not sure now. Right, okay, so the lintel, this is okay, this makes sense. So what we're saying here is we previously assumed that a precast concrete lintel, which is actually quite ugly, is going to go into the wall. Let's say we don't know what the finish is, and we come down the measurement and we find out, oh, everything's face brick. So we previously measured it as a lintel. We've got to take it out. We don't want it. It's going to look like shit. So what's going to be there instead? Well, it's going to be a brick on edge something, and it's going to be a brick on edge face brick on edge. I don't even know how to say that. Brick on edge lintel of face brick. So that's the adjustment, and it's like, how many different ways can you adjust something? Well, infinite. In this case, we previously said it was a +215 on each side. Remember that? Because we needed overlap for the bearing. So deduct the whole bloody thing, and we're going to go back to just taking a straight dimension because it's face brick. And yeah, I mean, okay, I don't know. It's going to be supported. So it's tricky. This, yeah. But because it's just that, and it's the brick on edge, you're going to support it and it'll be fine. Just take the straight width of the recess. The last item, guys. Thank goodness. The reveals on the sides. And because this brick on edge lintel measured the top as a solid item, the only things left are the sides, right? And why did we not measure the bottom? Why not? Think. And let's take a look. Why not? Because it's on the ground. There's absolutely nothing to measure there. Look, guys, it's been a blast. Not really. But I'm glad we got through that. I'm not sure if the model helps people or not. What I'll do is post the model in the comments as a link to my drive. And you can use the model if you want. If it's good and helpful, then please let me know. If it's not, then I will give up making models and find a new field. But yeah, that is it. That's what I made. I'll try and get to the other videos sometime this week. But yeah, thanks for listening, and hopefully that was helpful. Cheers, guys.